Hi everyone, welcome to the second webinar of the week. We're looking at having happier holidays, and yesterday we looked at managing one's brain in the midst of a shift from busyness to quiet and what happens and how we might manage that. And today we're looking at leaping into learning and fighting summer learning loss. And like we said yesterday, if you were to design the school year now, you wouldn't have a 6-week summer holiday. So my name's Andrew from Action Your Potential, and it's the last webinar of the school year. There's other webinars happening for our business clients, but this is the last one of the school year. So how tonight we're going to look at what summer learning loss is and how we can support our children, and they can support themselves to make sure that they're retaining some of the information that they've built into the structure of their brain. So summer learning loss attacks the brain and memory in a number of ways. First of all, the brain works on this basis. It strengthens the connections that are used most often. And so if connections are not used over the summer, they will begin to weaken. Forgetting is an active process, and we'll see that in a while. Our productivity and our purpose drop. Motivation has a big part to play in memory. For example, if we're really engaged and interested as we're learning something, our brain produces a chemical called acetylcholine, which is a neuromodulator, which makes memories more sticky. And if we're not interested, if our productivity and purpose have dropped, we've got less of that sticky chemical around. And we can, as we head into holidays, ignore our biorhythms, disrupt sleep, diet, exercise, etc. And that impacts on the brain's ability to keep information. So in order to understand the damage that summer learning loss can do, I think it's really helpful to unpack the process of learning and to be really clear that learning is a process. It doesn't happen in an instant. Learning is a process that is involving building information into the brain. And we're going to look shortly at how memory works, but let's just look at that learning process, because we need to understand that before we get to the practical suggestions of things that children and teenagers might want to do over the summer to keep themselves ticking over in terms of the learning they've already established. So we need to look at how our brains learn and how our memory works. And we know a lot more about both of these things now. We know at the level of the neuron what learning is, and we also have got very good idea now about what memory is. And memory doesn't sit in one particular place in the brain. So a memory of an event is not just in one place. The memory of that event is distributed around the brain, it seems from the evidence, and connected via an organ called the hippocampus, which kind of binds it together. More on that shortly. So let's look at how our brains learn. There's a lot of nonsense spoken about learning. You might have heard, for example, the idea of learning styles. You've probably heard there are visual learners, auditory learners, and kinesthetic learners. That is not true. There's that multiple intelligence theory as well, 7 or 8 different sorts of intelligence. A schema designed by Howard Gardner, an American psychologist, never meant to be used as a way of determining different people's intelligence. Is just looking at the sort of ways the brain can respond to information. What we know now is that learning happens at the chemical level in the brain, and learning, interestingly, learning in a sea slug and learning in a human brain at the level of the neuron is pretty similar. The difference in those situations is the human brain has obviously got many, many, many more neurons connected in many, many more ways and can manipulate much more complicated models of the world. But at the fundamental essence, learning is 3 processes, not one process. So you're not going to learn information in just one go. You're not going to learn the stuff you're doing in class in just one go. In fact, 2 of these processes rely as much on what the child or student does as it does on the teacher. Now, teachers will design opportunities to practice and recall information, but if students and us as parents are doing that as well, that is going to really support what's going on in the brain. So learning is getting it, that's understanding the information in the thought space of our mind. Really, the connected global network that we've got across our brain creates this opportunity to model information live and to understand it, those eureka moments we experience when we get it, that is the first step in learning. And often the way the curriculum structured in school, we tick it off. I've done it. I've done it. No, you haven't. You've just begun the process. Get it is the first process, which is understanding it in the lesson. Then there's encoding it, and that is practice. That is going back over it a number of times, 5 or 6 times, to begin to build it in to the structure of your brain. Once it's in there, the brain will start trying to connect it up with other information that's similar to it. And then finally, learning is recalling the information, pulling it out of memory and applying it in novel situations. And the recalling process also reinforces the chemistry of learning, which is a change in the way that neurotransmitters, chemicals between the neurons in gaps called synapses, a change in the way they behave. So this is a neuron. We've got 86 billion of these, and it's because of the way they operate that we can learn anything at all. So when they pass information from one neuron to another, they exhibit this flashing experience. It's not flashing in our brains, but it's the movement of an electrical signal down a biological wire, and that's called an action potential. When that action potential fires, it causes that neuron to produce a chemical in its nucleus. So basically, the firing of that neuron causes the DNA in that nucleus here to produce a chemical, which then travels out to the synapses. When that chemical arrives in the synapses, which are gaps between this neuron and the next one, that chemical strengthens that synapse. What I mean by strengthened is it means it makes it much easier for the electrical impulse to jump from this neuron to the one next door, or the one above it, or the one below it. And information that is in our brain that we've learned is a set of connected neurons in a long chain or pathway. So learning begins by strengthening these gaps 2,000 times smaller than a human hair, these synapses. And those changes are caused by DNA in the nucleus producing this chemical, which then takes time to build up and takes time to travel out to these synapses, these gaps. That's why spacing our learning out over time is much more powerful in terms of encoding information in our brain. If we practice over a number of days, that means it gives time for that chemical to be made, and it gives time for that chemical to travel out to the synapses. And then what happens is, once the connections are stronger, then action potentials move down those neurons much more quickly. And they then start causing that neuron to produce myelin, which is an insulation around that axon. And as you can see, the one on the right, the neuron on the right, the information is traveling down that neuron 10 times faster than it is the neuron on the left. And that is because you've got this myelinated axon. So it's like a better insulation, faster and faster. That's why, if you think about a skill, when you first start playing the guitar, it sounds awful when you're having to think really hard about where you put your fingers. As you get better and better at doing it, the brain encodes that activity. And that is the beauty and power of neuroplasticity. The brain is designed to make it easier to do things that we repeatedly ask the brain to do. That's how our neuroplasticity adapts and grows. So link that, you've got that whole process going on, and you've got it in the gaps between your neurons now. You've saved it in long-term memory. Let's look at how that memory system works. We've got short-term memory, which is the active firing of neurons towards the front of our head where we're holding information. That's got limited capacity, 4 to 7 spaces for information. So, a phone number. And all the time we're actively using our short-term memory, we're really confident we're going to remember that information. But the moment those neurons stop firing, the information's gone. It's not being held anywhere. It's being held in the active communication of short-term memory neurons. But we've got this incredible long-term memory where information is bound together by a structure deep in the brain. So deep in the brain, above the spinal column, is a C-shaped structure deep in the subcortical areas, about level with your ears, called the hippocampus. The hippocampus does a bunch of things. It's heavily involved in emotion, for example, but it also binds together memories. So if you're experiencing a lesson on fractions, you're watching the information, you're listening to the information, you're practicing some fractions, you're thinking about some fractions. If you then look at that material that evening, your brain will then refire those same neurons that experience that in the day. And then when you go to sleep, your hippocampus strengthens by refiring neurons that have been used more in the day. So connections that have been used more are differentially fired by the hippocampus. That means that basically they're starting to, the hippocampus is like a junction. It connects these little dots of information in the auditory cortex that does hearing, and the occipital lobe that does vision, and it binds it together in a memory. And if you look at that information again the next day, the hippocampus does that each night. So your hippocampus is like a memory organizer, and it is a route into all the different ways that you captured that information in your brain. And you captured it all over your brain in different parts of the brain. And that single moment in time is bound together by the hippocampus. And that information is held in the gaps in the neurons that were firing at the time. So at night, particularly in two sorts of sleep, NREM sleep, which is non-rapid eye movement sleep, that's the deep sleep for which we have no memory. You know, when we're in dreaming sleep, we're awake slightly, but in NREM sleep, we're completely out. And what's going on is a bunch of things, but one of the things that's happening is the hippocampus is refiring neurons that were used most heavily in the day to retain that information, working on the basis that if this information has been useful during the day, it must be important, which explains why if we don't look at any of the stuff we've learned during the school year over the summer holidays, we're effectively sending a message to our hippocampus that this information isn't important. So it starts to rub it out. Or forgetting is an active process in the brain. The brain is constantly cleaning itself and basically saying, these connections, they don't seem to have been used for a while. We'll repurpose them. We'll use them for some other sort of information. So the brain is constantly spring cleaning itself. So we're in this battle to remember information. And if it's information from school, like spelling lists and times tables and the history curriculum, it's less interesting to us, and it's going to fade slowly but surely over time. You know, you might have a child that knows every single dance in Fortnite. You might have a child that knows every single Pokemon and their evolved form. So their memory of those things is very powerful because they think about them or have thought about them a lot. So this is a mantra that we need to take into the summer holidays. If you don't repeat even a little bit, your brain is fighting to delete the information, and brains remember repeat information and stuff that's interesting to us. And let's be honest, most of the stuff in school is going to need to be repeated. So that's a powerful poster, I think. That's the rate at which our brain dumps information. Every 24 hours, it dumps 70% of our experiences. So by the next day, we've already started to forget 2/3 of what we've learned, unless we go back over it. And that's what a lot of the work we do in the evenings, working with young people, getting them to go back over information in a quick and simple and efficient way to remember things. Look how quickly we forget information. Within a week, we've forgotten 3/4 of it. Within an hour, we've forgotten over half of it. So it's not just you that doesn't have a great memory. We've all got fantastic memories, but we've got to get the information in there through these processes. So just a reminder, that's one of the big issues with summer learning loss. We're weakening connections. We're not as motivated, and we're not necessarily giving our brain all the things that it needs in terms of encoding that information and using it. So what can we do about summer learning loss? Here are some suggestions for both sorts of age group of child, so primary children and young people at secondary school and college. And there are 4 threads here, and we're just going to spend a little bit of time talking about some of these ideas. The first idea is really what we've just talked about in the first 15 minutes of this webinar. Arguments for staying curious and productive this summer, arguments for keeping your brain ticking over. And I'm not talking about hours and hours and hours and hours of additional work. Obviously, it's the summer holidays. Obviously, it's been a really stressful year. And, in the current situation with surging numbers, etc., of COVID, it's not necessarily going to calm down anytime soon. So it's really important to invest in well-being. But you'll know how passionate we are about well-being. We bang on about it all the time. So that's a given. We definitely need to look after ourselves and practice the 12 rocks of well-being and see our friends and do all the things that we love to do. But a little bit of repetition, a little bit of little and often practice will make such a difference in terms of remembering things in September after all the hard work we did put in, whether we were in school or learning from home. The second thread is it's really important, and it links to stuff we talked about yesterday. It's really important to plan every day and to make sure that each day has got some of these elements in. And I'm going to give you some examples. So the 12 rocks, well-being behaviors, a little bit of reading, and we're going to unpack reading in a second and look at it from two angles. Seeing our friends and spending time with people that we care about and who care about us. A little bit of little and often learning. Now that should be focused on some stuff to do with school, but equally can also be focused on skills in your home life. It might be anything from scootering to learning a foreign language, making sure you're following your biorhythms, you're sleeping when you're tired, you're exercising, you're managing your mood. We talked about yesterday, mood and emotion. Watch yesterday's webinar. It will be available by the end of the week once it's been edited. And we'll talk a bit more about screens shortly. Manage your social media and gaming times. Don't get into a space where you're just doing passive and easy, which is what we talked about. Brains, if they haven't got a plan, they will do passive and easy. So it's really helpful for the bit of our brain that calls it to order the prefrontal cortex to make sure that we've got a plan to follow. And here's an example in a very general sense of lots of different activities that would be helpful to build into a day. And there's no reason why a child cannot begin to put this stuff together. So that in the morning there, you've got quite a few of the rocks of well-being. Those four items at the top are all about the rocks of well-being. A little bit of reading, that might be reading for pleasure, or it might be reading for concentration or information. I'll talk about that in a second. A little bit, little and often learning. I'll explain that shortly. Building in a time when you help others, like you help at home, empty the dishwasher, do the hoovering, be helpful, listening to music and doing some playing. And then afternoon, you'll notice that some of the more difficult stuff is more in the morning, and that's because our prefrontal cortex is fresher. The sort of practice stuff is in the morning. A bit of fun, a bit more chores, a bit of an adventure, walk outside, bit of jigsaw, bit more playing. And then in the evening, bit of emotional hygiene. We talked about that yesterday, which is processing your emotions. A bit of sleep hygiene, making sure you're having a story, a bath, etc. Managing your worries, maybe a little bit of time on screen. But try and reduce screen time, the screen-demic that we're all living through, adults or kids. We spend way too much time on screens and it's not great for our mood. Okay, so for a young person, a student, or a child at secondary school, again, you'll begin to see a structure here, a bit of rocks in the morning, try and build them in, meditation and exercise, practice in the morning, helping others, a bit of time on their phones in terms of checking social media. And we're going to talk a bit more about that in a second, how you might divvy up tech time for personal use, fun. And the evenings are pretty similar in terms of structure, trying to make the heavy lifting cognitively happening in the morning. If you book appointments with yourself to do your reading, do your meditation, do your exercise, you're much more likely to do it. And you need to have those little appointments, make them short initially. And once they're in there, once those activities are there, you'll find yourself just doing them naturally after a few weeks. So let's just talk about devices and the bane of devices in our lives. They're incredibly amazing, aren't they? They are brilliant, fantastic, but they are passive and easy for our brains, and our brains love passive and easy. So it might be helpful to think about social and leisure tech use as two sorts of activity, active and passive. So there's doom scrolling, there's passive tech use, idle scrolling. Try and limit this to short bursts, because we can get stuck, particularly in the evening, just scrolling pointlessly through stuff. So 5-minute catch up with stuff that you're interested in on social media in the morning, the same in the afternoon, the same in the evening. That's like passive little 5-minute bursts. Then there's a different sort of tech use, which is about a young person's social life, particularly a teenager's social life. That's active tech use. That's messaging, that's WhatsApp, that's gaming with mates. But even when you're engaging with your friends on social media, try to talk on the phone or use FaceTime, or better still, go and see them. Active tech use might be 15 or 20 minutes of a slot in the morning, afternoon, and evening. But we all know as parents, and we're as bad actually, it flops out over massive long periods of time. But dividing tech use into those different sorts, because active tech use, where you're actually engaging with your friends, is of a different order. And particularly for boys, I'm a parent of 2 boys, gaming with your mates is great fun, and they have so much fun as they're laughing and shouting at each other playing the game. It's really important to delineate between those two. Just staring at your screen and scrolling through it is just going to reduce your mood. Okay, let's look at little and often learning practice. Try and get this done in the morning if you can, because it's going to be a bit of effort. You're going to battle your brain a bit. So for children, it should be around inspiring curiosity. We're talking maybe 15-minute activities. So these are over several days. They're not all on the same day. Choose a topic of interest: dinosaurs, cars, whatever it is, sport, and read for 15 minutes a day. So have the book open, read the book, and then make some notes on whatever the topic is for 5 minutes, either in a book or on a spreadsheet, a Google spreadsheet. Just make a little bit of notes about whatever it is that you're interested in. It might be submarines, might be helicopters, something you're really interested in. Or on a different day, listen to an Audible book. And while you do that, you could do some chores. It could be a fiction book, it could be a fact book. Watch a documentary of your choice on a subject that you're interested in. Read for pleasure. That maybe should go alongside this stuff. And keyword flashcards. I'll talk a bit more about little and often learning in a sec, and practicing flashcards. For students, reading a book linked to a subject that you're studying at GCSE or A level, and use flashcards for 5 minutes to make notes. That might be one activity you do on one day. These are like different days activities. Listen to an Audible book on a topic of interest, watch a documentary, and read for, so a kind of process where you're engaging your curiosity and attention. That's one aspect, maybe takes 15 minutes. And then flashcards, particularly for older students, but very powerful for year 4, 5, and 6. Flashcards where you generate some flashcards as a result of looking back through your revision notes, watching some subject specific topics on YouTube, basically connecting all these keywords on a document like this, creating some keywords, and then for secondary school students, using color to denote the topic, the subject. So allocate a subject to a color. So history's yellow, biology's green. Write 5 flashcards a day for words that you've already learned, words from last year. We're not talking about going forward. The teachers will handle that. We're talking about looking back. Just choose, write 5 flashcards for keywords or concepts. Go through your book, grab them, put those completed flashcards for different subjects in a box, shuffle them all up so that you've got history mixed with biology, because that interleaves and spaces the work out, and then read them every day. So, spend 5 minutes making the flashcards, 2 or 3 minutes reading them out loud, and use that box system to keep going over the ones that you're finding more difficult. So the box system works like this. You've got 3 plastic boxes on your desk. In box 1, you've got the ones that you've just made that you need to learn, all mixed up by topic and color. In the middle box, you'll move flashcards to that box when you've learned them a little bit, and they're in there, but they're not completely well remembered. And then on the right-hand side box, you'll look at those every 2 or 3 weeks, because they're pretty much in there. It's a factory production process. You've also got that color coding, and you can separate those flashcards out at some point. They're very great resources, and we're talking about 10 or 15 minutes. It isn't going to kill you. You will easily spend 10 or 15 minutes on your phone. And in terms of students, for another 15 minutes, a learning rep would be like a repetition would be, there's a great website for GCSE students called Seneca. There's lots of questions on there. There's lots of quizzes by exam board. There's great GCSE YouTube content. The danger with YouTube is there's distractions there as well. But if you're focused and you're doing it early in the day, watch a 5-minute video, make some mind maps using software called Mind Map or Poplet. And obviously lots of schools provide students with software like Hegarty and MathsWatch to practice, or just use a revision workbook. The CGP revision workbooks are brilliant. 5 or 10 minutes is all you need. 5 or 10 minutes makes a massive difference distributed over those 6 weeks. 5 or 10 minutes each day, alongside the curiosity stuff we talked about, reading and those sorts of things. And then a way to think about your structure for those 15 or 10 minutes in 2 blocks is that you're focused, you're just doing that. You haven't got 19,000 tabs open, you haven't got your phone in your lap, you're not trying to do something else at the same time. You're active, it involves you doing something, making a mind map, making a flashcard, not reading, not highlighting, pointless. Might as well go for a walk. Don't highlight or reread things, that doesn't stick. Every day, 5 days a week, and work on your weakest. That's the thing. Work on the things that aren't well stuck. Quiz yourself regularly. Note your progress. Get other people to quiz you as well. And we've got grids that you can use to just track rep 1, what subject did you look at? What information did you cover? And rep 2, exactly the same. Just because you then get a sense of what you've covered and what still needs to be covered. And on the reading side, you could, for a fact book, put a topic in and some information that you found out. And then reading for pleasure, just log the book that you're reading. And, maybe an idea about what you think about it. But, obviously you do that probably at the end. Just log it. Because logging it means that those circuits in your brain that look at productivity and contribution can see you making progress. Okay, just a few minutes left. I just wanted to mention some do's and don'ts of looking after yourself and your learning this holiday. Plan your day. We talked about that yesterday. Make sure that you've got a list of things that are ready to go when you're bored. So build a metaphorical creativity and learning and curiosity box. All the things that you like doing, making, baking, drawing, make a list of it. So when you're bored, you've got the list to refer to and you haven't got to make the list. And it's the same for teenagers as well. Make a list. Otherwise, you'll be on your phone, you'll be on your tablet, you'll be watching TV. And passive and easy is just not good for our mood and our brain. You could use Rock 11 to help you. Rock 11 is do something you love. And how do you find out what you love? Well, it's all about celebrating this concept of flow, which is those moments in your day when you're totally focused on something and you're so engaged in it because you've got good skill in it, but it's a challenge. So that might be sport related, it might be reading a book. If we can find out the things that our brain loves, and every brain loves different experiences, and build them into our experience, that is going to make us engage far more in those activities. And I just want to mention flow and gaming. Gaming, because loads of people say, I just love gaming. I just want to be a game designer. I want to work with games. Games are designed as artificial flow experiences. They put everyone in a state of flow. And it's much better to think about natural flow experiences, building hobbies and interests that naturally engage you fully. A computer game does not naturally engage you. It's been artificially constructed to do that job. So sport, chess, painting, writing, maths, dance, lots of different opportunities, activities, whatever floats your boat. And then you could track those experiences. You could literally make notes about the positive experience you've had. I saw my friend, we had a really good conversation. I built that thing, that was fantastic. I solved that problem, and use that as a way of thinking about GCSE choices or college courses, apprenticeships, careers. Look at the things your brain loves to do. That's something you could usefully do in the summer holidays. Do your rocks. Do practice the little and often learning that we talked about earlier, past papers, etc. Do, if you're a primary school child, practice letters, spelling lists, practice. Hindsight, looking back over what you've done, that year. Do set yourself a personal challenge. So it might be something in your, like learning a foreign language or playing an instrument or training your dog or getting better at swimming or trampolining. That will be good focus for your brain. So that little and often practice can move into personal areas of challenge. And then for older students, other sorts of challenges, opportunities for skills linked to careers, opportunities to support the local environment, opportunities to volunteer and support people. And finally, I just wanted to mention, if you're low, if your mood's low, move more, and help more. Think of others around your house. There's 1,001 different things that need doing. Offer to help, your parents do things. They'll be doing loads of different things. Have two activities. They'll be emptying the dishwasher, they'll be hoovering. Offer to help. That does two things. That gets you moving, that gets your prefrontal cortex engaged. It also turns on circuits around care and kindness for other people, and they're all positive mood boosts as well. And then that's the list of do's. We've talked a lot about those. Plan your day, do your rocks, be curious, practice little and often learning, practice personal skills, move more, help more. And that's the don'ts. Don't do passive and easy. It just makes you feel worse. Don't have a screendemic. Don't get stuck in a mood by not doing or moving, and don't ignore your well-being and learning, and bring it all together. Have a fantastic summer holiday. This has been recorded. We'll send it out to everyone, so you've got access to it during the summer. Have a fantastic summer holidays, and thanks for being part of the Neuro Ninja program. Take care, everyone.